Hello and welcome to the 9th edition in the series by the HR Tech Partnership. My name's Sharon Sagu and we're really pleased to have you join us this lunchtime. For those of you who haven't joined before, this is really an informal conversation about how we can facilitate various HR strategies using digital and AI solutions. And today's topic is team effectiveness. So I'm delighted to be joined by 3 panelists today. First of all, we have George Sarkadakis. George is the digital lead at Willis Towers Watson. And George, as well as his big day job, is also an author who's written extensively on both science and technology. So we're very lucky to have George with us today. His latest book is called Cyber Republic, and he talks of reinventing democracy in the age of intelligent machines. So one to look out for from George. We also have on our panel Richard Stokes. Richard is the Group Director of Reward and HR Technology for Agreco. And just a bit about Agreco, they're a FTSE 250 PLC with over 6,000 employees across 80 locations worldwide. So a lot to keep Richard busy there. And of course, we have Devyani Vaishampayam, who's the Managing Director of the HR Tech Partnership and has held a number of senior HR roles across a variety of FTSE 100 companies. So first of all, I'd just like to welcome George, Devyani and Richard. Just to mention to those listening that there is a chance to ask questions, so please do use the chat function below if there's anything that springs to mind. And I'd love to start by handing over to Devyani to really take the virtual floor and open the conversation for us this morning. Thanks, Devyani.
Thanks, Sharon. Well, there's no doubt, I think, that the current crisis has made team working quite challenging. Because of remote working, team members have found it quite difficult to have the odd coffee chat or to brainstorm as a group or even just build relationships. And equally, I think team leaders, it's not been easy for them in terms of getting feedback or giving feedback in an empathetic manner, getting insights into any issues the team may have or the team dynamics. Now, team effectiveness is a very broad topic. And for today's session, I think we'll focus on a few areas, particularly how do you get insights and manage team engagement? How do you encourage collaboration and idea generation? And overall, of course, how do you create a culture that focuses on trust and purpose and therefore improves team effectiveness? Now, where does AI and digital come in? I think there are 2 things that have changed significantly over the last 6 months. The first is people management used to be primarily a face-to-face activity, and now there's no doubt that a distributed workforce is here to stay. And AI and digital solutions, I think, can be very effective around virtual people management. The second is about data. Now, data has always been available through HRIS systems, but that data has been historical and often the lag can be quite high. The need today is more for real-time data, but particularly data that gives you predictive insights that can help HR and business leaders understand what issues are coming up and helps them to be proactive around organizing that. So hopefully the next half an hour should give you some insight into how this can happen. And of course, we have 2 great speakers here who have a wealth of experience they're going to be sharing with you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Devyani. Some really good ideas for us to consider. I'll go straight to the panel now, and I'd love to reach out to George first. George, it would be great if you could share, with this topic of improving team effectiveness, what it is that you're seeing yourself through your research or your clients doing, particularly in the way of AI and digital solutions.
Absolutely, and good afternoon, everybody. So AI has making inroads to HR for quite a while. It started, doing some really interesting stuff around recruitment, but it's moving now into more advanced forms of solving complex problems such as team dynamics. So if I was to sort of classify what I see, I would sort of concentrate on 3 areas where I see artificial intelligence systems really making a difference. One is around the whole concept of work and how we redesign work, especially in times of transformation and agile transformation. So you see systems, for example, and we have developed a system such as this ourselves at Willis Towers Watson called WorkView, whereby designers of work deconstruct work and redesign work. So you've got AI there at helping you do that redesign work. We also see systems of AI matching talent to work and talent to skills. So in a flatter organization, an agile organization, you need to be guided by some kind of intelligent concierge, if you like, in your career. So we see that area, heating up, if you like. And there's just two other areas I'd like to mention. One is around personal resilience, okay? If I'm resilient as a person, then I can be effective as a person, okay? So we see AI, becoming like your coach at the palm of your hand, a system that kind of follows you and helps you, reduce your anxiety, your stress, and build your personal resilience as necessary. And finally, and I'm talking now in more advanced forms of AI, especially in combination with scientific concepts coming from neurolinguistics and organizational psychology, kind of like delivering a new way of understanding team dynamics. Like now, for example, we're having a conversation. So systems can look into how we speak, how we communicate, and derive insights from those conversations. And that can then be fed back to the team, so the team can improve its performance over time. So these are really some, three new and very exciting areas, I would say, where AI is starting to make a huge impact in people management.
Absolutely. So no hiding behind the screen for much longer then, George, it seems.
Not at all, not at all.
Fantastic. I love the idea of the AI as a coach. So let's go to Richard now. Richard, what are you currently seeing in the way of AI and digital to improve team effectiveness? What's your experience?
I think that, whereas George is talking about some very interesting things, we're, a bit more at addressing the basics really. And I think it's the digital part that is important to us. We're in our first year of implementing Workday in Agreco, and as our core HRIS, and that replaces a very sort of fragmented landscape that we had prior to that, and it's had huge benefits for us in managing our people, managing our costs, and sort of driving efficiencies. You talked about in your introduction that we have sort of 6,000 people in 80 countries, which is quite a big thing to manage. Workday has given us a functionality that enables us and has enabled us to manage through the current crisis. So just knowing where people are, sort of what they're doing, whether they need to get home to be repatriated, whether we need them on site to man our generators and keep our suppliers and our customers going, has sort of been key to us. So it's made a huge difference to us. I think the other thing that I'd call out is Microsoft Teams. We were fortunate in that we put Microsoft Teams in as the standard across the company before the crisis, but I think we'd never envisaged using it in the way that we have. It's enabled those people who don't have to be on site to remain connected. It's given us an ability to keep our business going in a way that we just wouldn't have done otherwise.
Sure, no, fantastic. So no, good to hear of your experience within the company. And I guess even as George mentioned, there's been quite some knowledge or increasing awareness of these solutions. But I'll go back to you, George, because even though you've mentioned some great things now, the landscape's changed quite a lot over this year specifically. So if we then focus on the next 12 to 18 months per se, what is it that you see your clients doing differently perhaps in the way of AI around team effectiveness?
So I think the question now is what differentiates surviving from thriving? So companies have survived the COVID pandemic, I would say rather successfully, right? But now, clearly we see that there's a way out of that in a few months' time. So what's going to happen next? And when it comes to the workplace, I think the big debate here is, how do we change the operational model? How do we envisage a more flexible, mixed workplace that combines working from home, using digital, but also coming into the office for specific reasons in the physical space? So I think, this mixture between the physical and the digital will be different according to each company, but it has to happen. For example, I'm speaking to clients. One of the things that always comes up is networking and relationships within a company. Okay, especially for younger employees. Okay, that just joined the company and don't have network. They need the physical space. So technology can help a lot. Technology can help a great deal in order to bridge that gap between the physical and the digital. And AI, for instance, going back to what I said before in those three different areas, can come and fill in the gap. So you do need the foundation, just like Richard mentioned, you do need to have the foundational digital systems in place. But if you want to have that sort of agile and flexible workplace, then you will slowly need to start thinking about what do I need to add on top of my foundational systems in order to deliver the employee experience of the post-pandemic world, if you like. And that will include, natural language processing, so computers understanding how people converse. It will perhaps include that resilience, building your own resilience, and will absolutely, definitely involve work redesign at scale.
Definitely. Thank you, Georgia. Some really thoughtful points for us to consider. And, it'll be interesting to see how this surviving and thriving plays out, I guess, over the next 12 months, and we'll know more as time moves on. But Richard, what do you see yourself doing differently over the next 12 to 18 months around this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I mentioned Microsoft Teams. We're using that in a way that we wouldn't have envisaged 6 months ago. I mean, just an example, really. Our CEO has been able to connect with far more people and engage far more people in the company than he would have done before, when he was spending most of his time on aeroplanes. So that's been a huge benefit. I do appreciate, though, and would build on George's point about connectivity, because Teams does allow you to connect, and it allows you to keep the business going and not to lose productivity. But it works best when you've already got existing relationships. And I think as we move forward, those existing relationships will erode to a degree. And that may mean that, it's less efficient. So I think it's been a massive band-aid in the short term, but I don't think it'll be a total replacement for teams getting together, teams forming. A lot of our work is project-based. People do need to come together. They do need to to work out between themselves what's best for the customer. So it's great, but I think we're going to have to get to a new normal where we have a degree of face-to-face as well.
Absolutely, Richard. Thank you. No, and it will be really interesting to see the actual full impact of the reduction in international travel. You mentioned it with your CEO, but across the organisation, which we probably haven't even realised or come to term with yet. But no, some really interesting points from both of you. But I'd love to bring Devyani into the conversation, because Devyani, you're constantly in this space. You're judging competitions, you're facilitating roundtables, you're speaking at events. It would be really interesting for people to hear what you're seeing coming up in this space.
Yeah, so I think if I were to summarize what's happening currently, clearly, the large scale systems and data from that is being used to some extent, but we've already discussed some of the limitations. I think employee feedback, I think surveys is one area where probably they've gone digital at a faster rate as compared to the traditional, Gallup kind of once in 2 year kind of process that most large organizations had. And clearly connectivity has jumped up dramatically over the last 6 months through Zoom, Teams, etc. But I do think the next 6 to 8 months is, and I think George put it very succinctly, the difference will be between surviving and thriving. And what we see our clients really actively looking at right now is, firstly, feedback is around engagement is going to get even more important. But I do think the shift is now happening from intrusive feedback to non-intrusive. And that includes continuously having a good understanding of employee issues, moods, and wellness, mental health. I think all those have become hugely important. But again, what AI and digital solutions do is, you don't necessarily have to go asking employees. There's several different ways of getting this feedback. And I think George again referred to organization network analysis, which means really there's lots of information because employees have a big electronic trail or a print nowadays, whether it's email, whether it's using Slack, whether it's Zoom calls. And there is a way to glean insights from that around employee engagement, which means you're doing it again without really being intrusive to employees. The second big area is collaboration and relationship building. And again, I think both George and Richard have referred to that. It's not just new employees, it's clearly also existing employees who may find relationships eroding, particularly in a geographically dispersed international business. And having worked for those, I do know how important it is to make sure that that connectivity is maintained, particularly in terms of improving the whole customer service aspect of it. I think the other area that people have seen a dip currently is really idea generation and community building. But again, there are ways and means, whether it's virtual rooms, whether it's having digital solutions that can actively help brainstorming, that can help employees really engage around innovation. I think that's an area that could see a bigger uptake. And finally, I think coaching and mentoring in a very personalized manner. And I'm glad, George, you referred to that, because we're seeing actually a very active interest around how do you build up manager capability around coaching when the team is going to be still quite dispersed. I mean, you may meet them once in a while, but the fact is most of them will be far more remote than you have. And using more intelligent tools which can also personalize and improve the employee experience are seeing a lot of interest. And so in terms of technology, clearly there's a whole range. I mean, you have chatbots, which really is effective around two-way communication, right down to emotion sensing, which can help. And again, that's the far extreme of, you have a team meeting, you have employees coming together, and without being intrusive, it can really sense what's the mood, what are the emotions, and that's great feedback for management. I referred to organization network analysis. I really see this as becoming far more popular just because of the number of, it's not just engagement. You can figure out talent assessment, you can figure out who are the real influencers. So I think the kind of insights you can get can be quite wide. Virtual rooms, there's again talk of having virtual coffee areas where employees can get together. And again, probably the use of virtual reality solutions around that will go up. And finally, I think gamification has been great to keep employees engaged. And you will see a greater use of gamification around any of the solutions.
Thanks, Devyani. So, obviously we can see that there are lots of options, and that different HR leaders and business leaders who are listening right now could try or discuss with their team. So I guess there's lots to consider, and it'll be interesting to go back to George, if I may. I guess with this situation that's going on with the whole economy at the moment, business cases, budgets, costs could be very tricky at the moment. So it'd be great if you could share some ideas or tips that you have on building business cases specifically for these types of initiatives.
So let me just mention just 3 quick points that I think are important to keep at top of mind when making a business case. Number 1, I think clearly any investment from HR must be part of an overall company transformation agenda. It must align with the overall company's agenda. So therefore, it's important to build alliance at board level and support at board level for HR transformation, clearly. Number 2, I would say always focus on the employee experience, always apply the employee experience lens in those investments. We have clearly established correlations, very strong correlation between great employee experience and productivity and financial returns across almost every industry at Willis Towers Watson. So this is something that can help you decide what works and what doesn't. And the third one is, show the money, show the ROI. Okay. If we're talking about AI applications, the ROI should be at least 5x. Okay, 5 times minimum. Okay, for anyone CFO to take this investment seriously. So just those 3 tips from me.
Great, thanks, George. We'll remember that 5x figure. Richard, any tips from you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I would agree with everything that George has said, but I would want to focus on, the actually showing the dollars and the pounds in the business case and being able to present that in a credible way. So, there are all sorts of benefits that flow from these sorts of investments, but some of them are quite soft, some of them are quite, ethereal and out there. But you do really need to say, it's going to result in this many less people in the organization, this greater efficiency, because we can put them all in we can move to a help desk arrangement, and we can pull people out of country or change what they're doing. Or it can actually really change the way that we work with partners and suppliers. So a big thing for us in building our case was to look at the way we manage agency and contingent workers, which was all over the place. But once you actually get a handle on it all, you can control that cost and you can save the business, millions of dollars. So it's building your case on all of that. I think then you can start to report and track all the other benefits, and it gives everybody who's involved in sponsoring it a warm feeling. But I think then you've got to build your initial case on dollars and pounds, would be what I would say.
Sure, thanks, Richard, and a great build actually on what George was saying. So yeah, no, some really good points for people to take away. But I'd like to bring Devyani in at this point, if I could, because Devyani, obviously we're hearing about business cases, but to complement that, it would be great to hear of a practical way that people listening could try and understand these solutions, or an approach of where to begin with them.
Yes, I think one of the probably gaps that HR leaders often experiences, they read about AI and digital, but there's really very little for them to understand from a practical perspective. What are these solutions? How do they work? And of course, I think with the pressure on HR leaders right now with so many different things, the biggest issue is also a lack of time. And there is I think it also at times feels a little too distant, too scary. Probably, the feeling is it could be for other organizations, not for us. But the reality, I think, as George said, is it's happening very fast. And I think everyone needs to jump onto the bandwagon fairly quickly. So currently we run the Innovation Hub, which helps organizations do that. But I think as a first step, what we are currently doing is offering a complimentary 1-hour workshop to HR teams. And it helps them really just sit together as a team, look at a couple of issues that they're interested in, and brainstorm. But what we do is we provide them with quick insights into a couple of relevant solutions. So it's really a very hands-on, real, practical way rather than a conceptual way of approaching this issue. And of course, I think given where organizations are, everyone's, the whole range is quite high. It's really anything in the employee lifecycle, right from if you workforce planning, cultural leadership, performance management, coaching and development. It could be pay and reward, employee engagement. Learning and upskilling is a big one. Wellness is again of huge concern to organizations. So it's very issue-led rather than being tech-led.
Sure, thanks, Devyani. So obviously we can see there's lots of areas where you could think about, aside from team effectiveness, you could think about exploring these kind of solutions. But what I want to do is, because I'm conscious of time, we've got quite a few questions that have come in, and I would just like to get through a couple of them if we could. George, I don't know if you can see this on the system, but there was a question here which I thought maybe you could start with and maybe Richard could add. It's from John, and John says that he can understand how AI can be used in real-time analysis and how it can improve processes, but people work with people. So how do the panel see if AI can predict people relationships? And if a solution was available relating to predicting this people interaction or collaboration, would the panel see this as being useful? They're probably aligned to some of the points you made earlier, George. So how do you answer, John? What do you think?
So clearly, for anyone who's using Facebook, there's AI algorithms behind Facebook who are, predicting your relationships. very much so, and therefore they suggest, people you should connect with, and we see that at LinkedIn as well. So there is, AI can do, can sort of nudge people towards, getting introduced and building a network and so on and so forth, right? Clearly. Now, how we do that, how we implement that into the company, these are questions that involve, discussions around the ethics of that. You should definitely have, the voice of the always the voice of the employee in those discussions, right? It has to be a two-way conversation. There's benefits and risks, and I think the uppermost issue to always have in mind is transparency and trust. So if there's a culture of transparency and trust, then I think AI will be more welcomed, if you like, more easily adopted in such a culture. If there's a culture where there's no transparency, no trust, then AI will probably fail.
Sure, no, great point. And just another question.
Can I just add a quick,
sure, Viviani,
great. Relationships, sorry, I think a key driver for this today is really talent and skills. And we are moving away very quickly from a top-down approach towards the use of talent and skills to a more collaborative, interconnected network where people can reach out, but they can also make themselves available. And I think AI solutions really facilitate that.
Yes, I absolutely agree with Devani on that. And, we're doing that in terms of, building databases of the skills of our technicians, the aspirations of our people, so we can actually, deploy them in a way that fits their needs and that utilizes their skills and abilities.
Great,
so
thank you, Richard.
That's a way of doing it.
Perfect, thank you, Richard. And Richard, do you have any tips to convince employees who may not feel comfortable using a tech solution? Are there any ways that you can make them feel a bit warmer, so to speak, about using these things?
Maybe. And we do have that problem. I mean, we've got, technicians who are based in the Amazon and don't really, connect with, other people or very much with technology. So we do have to work quite hard on all of that. And I think a lot of it is sort of baby steps, and don't scare people too much, and, show them how it works well for them. I can't hear you, I'm sorry. I've lost audio.
Richard, you're not alone. I think we've lost Sharon probably. So Devyani?
Okay.
That's fine. In any case, I think we are coming to the end. I just wanted to go back to a few takeaways based on the conversation and the insights that a panel has provided. Just give me a minute to share that. Right. So I think if I were to look at the key takeaways here, what has emerged is AI can be used to deconstruct and redesign job roles. And that's important in today's environment in terms of how teams get created. However, it's becoming equally necessary to improve collaboration and innovation. And again, I think the challenges of remote working now mean a very different approach could be needed. AI systems provide deep analytics on team effectiveness and help teams improve their performance. And we've seen how this can be done in a non-intrusive manner, but also just using the data that's available, and the solution just sits on top of that. And finally, I think to round off with what Richard said right now, start small, deliver early incremental success, don't scare people. And therefore, I think a pilot is probably one of the best ways to start on this journey. So thank you, everyone. And thank you both the panel as well as the audience. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which is in partnership with LawForce Associates. And that's around exploring diversity and inclusion through AI and tech. And it's on Thursday, the 24th of September. Thank you and good day.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Richard. Apologies for that. Thank you to everyone joining as well.